Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to talk about how you can integrate Entity Framework Core in your Blazor WebAssembly application. Entity Framework is .NET's ORM framework which helps us perform database operations and not deal with opening the connection, closing the connection, writing SQL queries. It does all that for us. There are two approaches. One is code first approach and another is database first approach. In code first approach, you create C# models, and depending on that, then you create database after applying migrations and updating your database. In the second approach, which is database first approach, in which you create a database already, and from existing database, you can create models and DbContext, which will help you perform your database operations. So in this episode, we are going to use database first approach, where we will have an existing database for performing our operations in Blazor chat application. So I have already listed down the steps which will help us install Entity Framework Core in our project and then perform operations. But before I jump into the steps, let's first understand what all columns and what all tables do I need in order to deal with our Blazor chat application. So for that, I'm gonna go to my Blazor chat application, and you can see that Julius Caesar is already logged in, and he has first name, last name, email address, date of birth, about me section, and we have contact section, and then we have settings. In settings, I have notifications and dark theme. So if I uncheck this, then the theme changes. If I go to profile page, come back to settings, you can see that it's persisting these settings too. So we're gonna need some columns for that. In contacts page, if I want to chat to someone, the chat message gets sent, and I need some chat history table so that I can maintain the history of the messages between people. So we're gonna need another table for that. So we're gonna need two tables: users table and one is chat history table. Currently, I do not have any tables. I have just data shown from the contacts page, which is dummy data. If I open my contacts page, you can see that this is dummy data, which I generated. Okay, so the first step will be to create the database, right? So if I go to my steps again, it's saying that create database and the tables. So for this project, I'm going to use SQLite because it gets easier for people who are cloning the GitHub repo, whoever has access to GitHub repo. If they're cloning the repo, then it gets easier for them to get started instead of they don't have to create a database and make that connection. They can literally run the project from out of the box, and then it works just fine. So we are going to use SQLite database, but you can use any database as far as Entity Framework Core is concerned. I should say most of the database. So if you Google Entity Framework Core database providers, then you can see the list of databases that Entity Framework Core supports, and it has SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle. So it has most of the databases which are out there right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our SQLite database, and we will use that database for performing all the operations. I'm going to stop this, and then let's close our terminal. And in the server project, I'm going to create that database, and we'll use that database for performing operations. So I'm gonna create a folder called as DB, and in DB I'm gonna create a file which is going to be blazing chat.db, which is the extension of SQLite databases. And for running the queries for SQLite, what I've done, I have installed an extension called as SQLite. It's pretty sweet extension. It helps us run SQLite queries in VS Code. So if you are working in SQLite, I suggest that you should install this extension. And after installing the extension, if I right click on my DB file, and we get an option of opening the database. So if I click on open database, that should open the database in that should open the database here in the VS Code, and you can see that I can see that there are no tables right now. So let's go ahead and create the tables and insert some data so that we can play with it. So I'm gonna say that I need a new query, and I've already written a query which creates the tables, and then it creates some data so that I can deal with the so that I can test if it's working fine or not. So I'm gonna paste this query. In this query, the query is pretty simple. Like I said, we'll need two tables. One is user table and another is chat history table. In user table, we're going to need user ID, email address, password, source. I'm adding source column because in future videos, we are going to talk about Google sign-in, Facebook sign-in, Twitter sign-in, so that I know where this user is coming from. Is it application user or is it external login user? So that's the reason I'm adding source here. And then there's first name, last name, profile picture, date of birth, about me section, notifications, and dark theme, which are settings that we're storing as integers. And then I'm creating a chat history table where I have a from user and to user, and I added some foreign keys so that I can relate my chat history table to my user table. Okay. And then in the insert query, I'm inserting some records. There are 10 users that I'm inserting so that we can test with these users when we're testing our entity framework. Okay, so I'm going to run this query. I'm going to say Control-Shift-Q, or I could just right click and say run query. That will run the query and it will create the table user, chat history, and insert those 10 records into our user table. So let's close out of this. And I'm going to refresh this. Then you can see the user table and chat history table getting created in our SQLite database. So when I say, I'm going to right click on my user table and say show data, and you can see the data that we just created is showing up in the table. Okay, so we have an existing database now. Now we're going to need to add the connection string of this database into our app settings so that we can use that connection string for everything that we're going to do for our application. So we don't have to copy that connection string everywhere we want to use this database, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my app settings here, and here I would like to add a connection string, and I'm going to say that is connection strings, and then I would like to name my connection string as Blazing chat, and the connection string of my database is going to be data source, and the path of the connection string is going to be the path of the file. So I'm gonna right click on Blazing chat and copy path and paste it here. And we'll have to replace this / with double /. So I'm gonna say Control-H to replace that. And here in the replace text, I'm gonna say double / and replace all that. Okay, so that is a correct connection string for my SQLite database. Okay, and like I said, if you're using any other database, you can go to connectionstrings.com. And if you're using SQL Server or any other database, then this site helps you figure out the connection string for your project. Okay, so if you're doing that. All right, so now we have the connection string added into our app settings. We are going to need to install a tool which will help us scaffold this database into models and DB context. Okay, so for that, if we go back to our slides, you can see that install a tool, which is going to be a .NET-EF core tool, which will help us scaffold our database. For that, I'm going to go to my project again and open my terminal. And here I'm going to say .NET. We would like to install a tool. Let's install it globally because we could use it in other projects too. And I'm going to say it is .NET .NET-EF. Okay. If I have already installed this tool globally on my project, on my machine, and if I hit enter, it's going to show that tool.NET.EF is already installed. But if you have not installed, I suggest that you should run this query. If you have installed this tool a long time ago and you want to update this tool, then you can just say .NET tool update and hit enter, and that will uninstall and reinstall the latest stable version of .NET-EF Core tool into on your machine. Okay, so that's fine. We install this tool into our machine, but to enable the commands which are there in this tool, what we need to do, we need to add a package into our server project. So that way our .NET-EF Core tool knows that which project it should use for scaffolding, right? So what I'm going to do, we need to install a tool, and the name of the tool is Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.Design. So I'm going to copy that and Google it, and you can just go to the NuGet package here and copy this text, which is .NET add package Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.Design. So I'm going to copy that, come back to my VS Code, and add that text into my command line here. And make sure that you're doing Blazing Chat server project, because you don't want to install this package into our client, because it doesn't really make sense. We want to scaffold our database into models and DbContext into a server project so that we can use it as a web API. So I'm going to hit enter, and that will add a package, which will be EntityFrameworkCore.Design. And if you want to see if it already did it or not, you can go to your CS proj file. And I'm going to bring this down, and you can see that it added a Microsoft Entity Framework Core Design package into my project. Okay. All right. So another package that we are going to need is Microsoft Entity Framework Core.Sqlite. See, it's okay that we added the tool and the design package so that it knows which project to use, but we should also tell it which database engine we are using, so that it helps us to scaffold, run the SQL syntax and scaffold that database into models and DbContext, right? So we are using SQLite for our project, but you could use any database engine that you like. Like I said, you can go to this database provider site and look up for the database provider that you want to use. We are using SQLite, so I'm going to click on this, and then it'll take me to the NuGet package, where I'm going to copy this text, which will add the package, a SQLite package. It'll give me the command line to add SQLite package into my server project. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to paste that line. It'll add that package into my server project. So if I hit enter, it will connect to the internet and add that package into my server project. Okay, you can see that package added into my server project. Okay, there is one more package that I want to install, and the reason why I'm installing is because I want to name my DB sets as plural names. And this package helps me do that. I don't know why .NET Core team did not do that, but this package, I'm going to install it to name my DB sets as plural. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go to my command line and paste it here and hit enter, and it will install that package onto my server project. I'm going to share these links in the video description so that you guys can install these packages too. All right, so that's all we need to do to have everything to scaffold our database. So let's go ahead and scaffold that database. For scaffolding the database, what I'm going to need to do, I'm going to need to run a command which we will use the EF Core tool that we installed. And the command goes something like this. I'm going to say .NET. I want to use EF tool. And I want to scaffold the DbContext. So I'm going to say DbContext scaffold. And here we should pass the name of the connection string that we added into our app settings, so that it uses that connection string to find the database and then uses that database to scaffold into our project. So I'm gonna pass the name of the project, which is name of the connection string, which is Blazing Chat. And then here we should pass the name of the service provider, name of the database provider that we would like to use for scaffolding a database. So I'm going to pass that, and then I'm going to say the output folder is going to be models, and I would like to scaffold this into my models folder. So when I hit enter, it'll try to build my project, and then it'll scaffold the database that we just created into our models folder into our server project. So you can see that it build succeeded, and you can see that it created a models folder here with user table, with user models. I'm gonna close my terminal here. With user table, with user ID, email address, all the columns that we had in our database, and chat history, where it has all the columns that they were in the database, and DB context, and it named my DB sets as plural names, so that is good too. You can see that chat histories and users. Okay, so now that we have everything to access the data from the database, what I would like to do, I would like to create a controller which will return all the users, if I show the data, all these users into JSON format. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this weather forecast and create another file here, and name another controller as user controller. Okay, user controller, and then we'll have to rename the class name. So it's user controller. I should use user controller for logger. The constructor name should be user controller. This is going to be user controller. And instead of returning weather forecast, I would like to return the list of users here. Okay, I want to return list of users. We'll have to bring in the namespace. So I'm going to press control dot and using statement. And here I'm going to use the Blazing Chat DB context to return all the users. So I'm going to say using statement. I want to use our DB context, new Blazing Chat DB context, and create an instance of it, and use that instance to return all the users in JSON format. Okay, let's run this and see if this works or not. Okay, so I'm going to say .NET run. That should build my project and run my project. I'm going to go to my browser, and I'm going to first check weather forecast. So I'm going to go to weather forecast link, and you can see that it's returning in JSON format, and just like that, I want to return my users too. So I'm going to go to my users link. I'm going to say user, and you can see that it's throwing an exception. It's saying that a named connection string was used, but the name Blazing Chat was not found in application configuration. So the instance of DB context that we created, it does not know how to use I configuration to get the connection string that is there in app settings. So to fix this problem, what we need to do, we need to add our DB context, our Blazing Chat DB context, into our services. So I can go to my startup class, and here I can say that we like to add some services, which is going to be a DB context service. And I'm going to say add services, add EntityFrameworkCore.Sqlite. And here I'm going to say it is going to be add DB context, add DB context, and the name of the DB context is going to be Blazing Chat. So once we add this into our services, then we can inject that into our controllers. So I'm going to say Blazing Chat context. We'll have to bring in a namespace. So I'm going to say control dot, or we can bring in the namespace. I'm going to go to my user controller, And just like we are injecting the logger, we would like to inject our Blazing Chat DbContext. So I'm going to say Blazing Chat DbContext, and this is going to be a private variable here, but we would like to inject that Blazing Chat context, which is added into services. And then I'm going to say this private DB context should get assigned with the injected DB context. Okay, and then we don't need to initialize this. We can just remove this code. It will directly use the private variable DB context for returning the users. I'm going to format this, Control T, Control F, so it doesn't annoy me. And then I am going to run my project. I'm going to say .NET run and go to my project. And if I refresh my page, there you go. It's returning all the users that we just created. We created a database, we created columns, we created data, and we added some packages, and how easy it was to get data into JSON format from a SQLite database. Awesome, right? Now, what I would like to do, I would like to show these users instead of showing these dummy contacts. So if I go to my contacts page, you can see that I'm showing these contacts, which are dummy demo data. Instead of these contacts, I would like to show the contacts from my user controller, right? So for that, I'm going to stop my server and then go to user controller, and we are going to need to return contact list. We can't return user list, and this is something that I'm going to fix in the next episode. We're going to talk about MVVM architecture, so that we don't have to convert our database models into view models all the time. We'll talk about how we can use MVVM architecture so that this conversion gets easier. But for now, let's convert these users into contact list, and then we can show those contacts on our page. So for that, I'm gonna say that first of all, let's catch these users, and I want to return contacts, not users anymore. And let's create new list of contacts, and I'm gonna loop through my users. I'm gonna say var user and users, and here I want to add contacts. I want to add users into contacts. So I'm gonna say contacts, add new contacts, and here I'm gonna say user dot first name and user dot last name. Okay, and this will add the contacts, and then I'm gonna say return contacts, and this will return all the contacts back to the client. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my contacts page here, and instead of getting forecast, let's copy this, copy that, and instead of getting forecasts, I would like to get contact list. So I'm gonna copy that, paste it here, and instead of getting an array of weather forecast, I want to get a list of contacts, and instead of calling a weather forecast, I want to call user. And let's comment this code so that we're not showing any dummy data on our page. Sweet. All right, let's run this. If I run this and go to my browser and refresh my page, you can see that now the data, the 10 users that we added, they're all coming from the database. Awesome, right? So, Entity Framework is a huge topic, and there are so many things there in Entity Framework, and we'll learn about some of them in the video series as we need them. But if you want to dive deeper into it, I have already created a YouTube series on it, where I've created 13 episodes where I'm talking about how you can get started, how you can deal with authentication, JSON Web Tokens, and how you can deploy it on your server and Azure services. I'm talking about all that. So if you're curious about Entity Framework Core, I suggest you should check out the series. And yeah, that's all about how to add Entity Framework Core in Blazor WebAssembly application. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.